Welcome to a special edition of the BGC Book Club. Actually, it's all about love on Valentine's Day. So I'm so pleased to bring you a wonderful love story that is not just about romantic love, but familial love and just love for humankind. And this is going to be something very special that I know you're going to enjoy. I'm super excited to be here and to bring back someone who's been with us before with this new novel of hers, which is spectacular. So without any further delay, let me go ahead and introduce our guest for the evening or afternoon or morning, depending on when you watch. Suzette D Harrison is a native Californian and the middle of three daughters who grew up in a home where reading was required, not requested. Her literary career began in junior high school with the publishing of her poetry. While Mrs. Harrison pays homage to Alex Haley, Gloria Naylor, Alice Walker, Langston Hughes, and Toni Morrison as legends who inspired her creativity, it was Dr. Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings that unleashed her writing. Suzette, the award-winning author of Taffy and 8 other books that include romance, historical fiction, and a children's story, is a wife and mother who holds a culinary degree in pastry and baking. And speaking of awards, she also has recently won an award for The Girl at the Back of the Bus, which is the book that we discussed the last time that she was with us. And she won the award for Best Black Historical Romance from Black Girls Who Write. And her book that we'll be discussing tonight, which is The Dust Bowl Orphans, also recently won an award from Romance in Color, and that was their award of excellence. And as we discuss this, you'll understand exactly why. So without any further delay, here is our guest of honor, Suzette D Harrison. Welcome, Suzette.
Good evening, Miss Marcy. I am so delighted to be with you again. Thank you for
Oh
the
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I love you and your work. So it's definitely an honor to have you back with us to discuss your new book, The Dust Bowl Orphans, which this is being recorded on the 8th, but was released just yesterday on the 7th. So
Yes, ma'am. Thank
congratulations.
you. Thank you
Congratulations.
so much. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So wow, I mean, there's just so much about this book. Just to give people a little bit of an idea and show us the cover because I don't have a physical one this time, just so they can see what it looks like. Yes, that's what it looks like. Look at that wonderful cover. Beautiful.
Yeah.
But this book is there's just so many wonderful themes and ideas, which we'll get into some of that, but just kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what the Dust Bowl Orphans is actually about.
Yes, ma'am. Like The Girl at the Back of the Bus, which is the novel that came out last Black History Month of 2021, The Dust Bowl Orphans is also a dual timeline. So that's where you have two different stories, two different heroines, in my case, heroines, and they're from two different time periods. So we have Faith Edwards, excuse me, Faith Wilson, pardon me. Faith Wilson is our historical character from 1935. She lives in Oklahoma, and thus the Dust Bowl Orphan. She comes from Oklahoma. And then her counterpart is Zoe Edwards, who's a contemporary figure. So you have these two stories, two heroines, kind of, I like to think of it like trains, two trains
Mm.
on parallel tracks, running side by side. And at some point in the narrative, they intersect and they connect. But overall, the Dust Bowl Orphans is, as you said, to me, it's a love story, not in the sense of romance, but the love of family,
Mm-hmm.
the determination of family, the determination for freedom and for bettering oneself and leaving something that no longer is suitable, no longer works for you, and having to say goodbye. So it's a journey, it's an odyssey, in some regards, for this young lady named Faith Wilson, who is only 15 at the
Mm-hmm.
time when the book opens.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's definitely an odyssey. So many different things came up to me in this because, of course, tell us a little bit about the Dust Bowl. Some people might not even know what that is. Start there.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that because I don't want to assume anything or insult people's intelligence by overtelling. But the Dust Bowl is a phenomenon that happened in the state of Oklahoma and the West around this time period, the 1930s. And what happened was because the topsoil was so dry and it was, very arid and winds and over farming and a lack of rain, a drought essentially. So what happened was the topsoil in Oklahoma and some other states as well, it would billow up anytime the wind would come in, and it was black soil. And sometimes those winds were so vicious that the dust would just plume up into the sky and it would cover things, and they were called black blizzards. Sometimes those black blizzards would be high enough that it would actually cover windows of houses and even reach the roof of the house.
Wow.
We're not talking about just little dust in my eye and I need to wipe it out. We're talking about the sky becoming black.
Wow.
It's a force of nature, that cannot be stopped. And there were times where children who were at school, if a black blizzard blew in based on the ferocity, they'd have to stay at school overnight. These little
Mm,
one room schoolhouses that we used to have way back when. They'd have to sleep there overnight because it was too dangerous, too hazardous for them to come outside and get caught up by these storms. So we're
right.
talking, the drought, and then the livestock is dying. So you have farmers who normally were able to, eke out, excuse me, not eke out, but they were able to have a sustainable living through their crops. Now, all of a sudden, these dust bowls are just decimating things. So
Mm,
most people, when they think of Dust Bowl, they probably think of John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath.
right.
The Dust
Right.
Bowls is my love story, literally to my great grandparents, because they migrated from Oklahoma around this time and migrated west in search of better.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Because some people might say, "No, what in the world is the Dust Bowl?" Because many of us, I've read about it years ago. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
a current top of mind thing. And I love the fact that you're saying that for you, it's personal.
Mhm.
And I remember you telling me that the last time that we talked, that your next book had kind of a personal connection to you. So I think that's awesome because, as you mentioned, like with Steinbeck, Grace of Wrath, or even, and you mentioned this in the book, some of the photographs or things that
Yeah,
you may have seen, we aren't included.
exactly.
So I think that is very powerful that, not only do you have that history, but that you're sharing this with the rest of us who can
Yeah.
see, oh, okay, we were a part of this as well.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There's we hear of the term Okies. Maybe some of us, I know there are different generations who might be watching this, but I remember growing up hearing the term Okies. But that's where it
Mhm.
came from, was this mass exodus of Oklahomans leaving the state of Oklahoma after these, the devastation of the Dust Bowls. And of course, a lot of them came further west and into California. And there was a lot of prejudice, even against the white Oklahomans, because you're taking our jobs and there's too many of you coming here. So some of the things that we're kind of dealing with today, but it's just a different
Right.
category of people that we're looking at side eye. You're taking our jobs and coming into our country. So a lot of these Okies experience that same kind of discrimination and backlash because of not their race so much, but because of the economics of the time. But again, you don't see Black Okies that, depicted. I don't know that I've ever seen depictions of African Americans being included in that wave of migration.
Absolutely, because I'm thinking to I'm trying to think of the what's the name of the book? It's the book that talks about the people who were moving from different parts of the country, Black people. The
Warmth
great I can't think of
of-
it.
Is it the warmth of other suns?
Yeah, One for the Sons. Thank you, because it was in the back of my mind. But, but
Love.
she does talk about people going to California, but usually they're coming from the South. You don't think
Exactly.
coming from, basically the Midwest.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. And that's, I think, is a fascinating part of it as well, because you're right. Every time, well, not every time, most times we talk about the Great Migration, we're talking about African Americans going up north to Detroit and to
Right.
Chicago,
Hmm.
places like that. We forget that there was a mass amount of people that also came, further west to California.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I found interesting, and I'll let you share an excerpt here in just a moment, but one of the other things I found interesting is the fact that one of the characters was enslaved by Native American, which I had never heard that before. Quite honestly, I'm like, what? I said, what?
Right, right. That's a sticky tricky right there. Yes, ma'am. There were nations of natives, first people here, Native Americans that did actually own and have slaves, enslaved people that were of African descent. And you even have a whole tribe called the Seminole, that they actually intermarried or, had babies with each other, whatever. But you know
Right,
what I'm saying. So they actually had a whole
right.
nation of Seminole people who were, part African American, African, part Native. So yes, we were enslaved even by those who are looked at as, the noble natives.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. So that's one thing I really love about your books in general is that, just all of the history, so yes, you're reading for the story, but and what's happening with these specific characters, but
Yeah.
there's so much history within it. And I know that you do have a background in Black studies, so history is your thing. You love history and our culture, so I just
Yeah.
really appreciate that because I love to learn when I read. So thank
Yeah,
you for
so do I. So do I. Yeah, exactly. I think that reading should serve a purpose. It should be entertaining, but it also should be enlightening and maybe give us it's like a window or door and access to maybe something that we didn't know before or that we
Mm,
kind of knew and now we get, more solidification of that knowledge. But I personally want to grow when I read. Of course, there are times I just want to read something that's lighthearted. Don't feed me
right,
all entertain me right now. I just want to
right,
escape.
right.
I just need to
Exactly.
escape. But then, yes, there are moments I'm like, oh, yeah, let me learn something.
Mhm. And you will
Yeah.
definitely do something with that. And I didn't even make the correlation Black History Month with this book and the last one. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, smart
Yeah.
lady.
Smart publishing company. They did that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So if you don't mind, of course I have more questions, but if you could just share
Yeah.
just a little bit, just so people can get an idea of your style, and then we can get into some of the other things about the book. So
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. So I'm just going to read from the first part because Miss Marcy doesn't like spoilers. She wants y'all to go and get the book. So we're just going to
yes,
start, the first part that doesn't really go beyond what we've already talked about. So it's actually
right.
the part where this black blizzard blows in. And we
All right.
see the two young ladies. Faith is the older one, and then her baby sister Hope on the cover. And these are the two that are in this passage. So this is Faith. I opened my mouth to command Hope's return, but words took a back seat as something eerie skittered down my spine and left me shivering. I tried to shake it off, only to notice the sky. It was absent of rain clouds, yet steadily darkening. My ears caught the sound of a low, deep wind, like how Papa hummed when working the fields. Suddenly, it was the only sound, as if creation had bowed to its symphony. That's when I knew a black blizzard was coming. I glanced over my shoulder slowly and hesitantly, as if something inside sensed the magnitude of the monstrosity and meant to spare my soul from the terrorizing reality. Terror is too tender a word. Horror is too pretty. If I had the ability to descend into Hades and come back again, that evil voyage could never inspire an accurate description of the wall of black swirling dust rampaging in the not too distant northeast. Always be at the ready. Papa taught us that lesson, but black blizzards hammered it in. Those dry phenomena could come out of nowhere without warning signs in advance. Slow, low, or so fast and furious you couldn't prepare yourself. This was one of those, making it impossible for me to catch my breath. And there you have it, a little excerpt from the Dust Bowl Orphans.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. But yeah, that just gives you just a little snippet of how things get started. I love to hear you read anyway. I
Thank
think
you.
on our last conversation, my mom was like, "Oh, she has such a nice voice." I'm like, yes, she does.
Oh, mama. Thank you.
So
That's kind.
yes, there's just so much because, of course, these aren't these. This isn't giving anything away because even in like the little blurbs about the book, it talks about how basically the storm comes up in the. Even in the title, the girls end up being separated from their family.
Yes.
And it's just like, wow, just thinking about that is one of the things that kept going through my mind is, yes, this is happening, in the 30s, in the 1930s, but it also put me in the mind of during the times where African Americans were enslaved and how to be separated from your family. And there be this thing where a lot of people would go through whatever it is they needed to go through, attempting escape, all sorts of things to be able to come back and get that connection with their loved ones. And I just find that in this book, that it was interesting that is something that continued even in later years.
Yes, that determination, that power of family. I think it's brilliant and it's beautiful. We today we have so much in our news about the decline of the Black family and the absenteeism of Black fathers. And I'm here to tell you it's not always true. There are many of us who have been blessed to have spouses, husbands, etc. And then there are some of us whose parents are not together or have walked away. I'm one of those. My parents divorced when I was 5, and my father chose to go another way. But again, this book is a tribute to those who fight to stay and who fight to find each other. And I love that, Miss Marcy, because I didn't even make that parallel myself about how when our ancestors were enslaved and they fought to find each other. So I'm glad that the Dust Bowl Orphans is resonating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and I'm one, like I say, everyone has a different story. My parents divorced when I was 13, but my dad and I were like this until
Yeah.
the day he passed away, almost coming up on 3 years ago. So, yes, just every person's, trajectory is definitely different, but that whole thing about family is just as I mentioned in my introduction, like, yes, there's some love that happens, romantic love, but this is kind of like a sidebar. It really is more about this family, coming together and doing, by any means necessary, figuring some things out about how to do that. Well, that's kind of like what was happening before. I also found very interesting with Zoe in her quest. Well, basically, she's a curator in an art museum and works for an art museum. And so, of course, I found that very interesting because, I like to do art and spend a lot of time in museums. So, yeah, but I just found just interesting in the way you were talking about the things that were happening with her, just being a Black woman in predominantly white spaces and oftentimes being relegated to I think I wrote it down specifically what it's a curator of Negroes and lesser things. I'm like, oh wow. But I mean
Yeah.
just wow. Just looking at that, in the modern day, I could, relate to that, being in spaces where you might be one or only, or feeling like because you are a Black person, that's all you can talk about is Black things. And not to say that there's a problem with that, but not to be relegated to that space
Right.
necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. I was really fortunate, Miss Marcy, that I was able to connect with a Dr. Bridget Cooks. She's a professor at UC Irvine, and she herself is a curator of art, a Black
Okay.
African American woman, and she has a book, a kind of a seminal piece about Black curation of Black arts and exhibit, etc. So I was blessed to connect with her and be able to interview her and talk to her about her experience as an African American woman who is a art curator and an art, professor and expert, so to speak. So that was really refreshing. I always do my best to try to bring some form of realism in,
Hmm.
especially when these historicals, because I want them to really have authenticity
Right.
and to, really ring genuine. So that was a blessing to be able to talk to her to get a sense for what is Zoe dealing with? What's her
Right.
everyday life look like? What is her professional life look like? What are some of the challenges that she may have come up against? So I'm very, very grateful for Dr. Cook's, allowing me into her private space so that I could, pick her brain.
Absolutely. I mean, and just thinking about that because, yes, in that curator space or in that art space. And I mean, it's true. One of the things that I have found out since I started getting more into art is that like if you go into most museums, major or museums, you don't see that much Black art.
Mhm, mhm.
You don't see us represented. There might be, it's getting better because actually this past weekend I went to see the Obama exhibit here in Atlanta. The Obama portraits are here.
Yeah,
So, it's getting better. You're seeing more of our artists having the opportunity to show at major institutions. But then you just think of the vast majority of so many great, wonderful ones that we love. And then you mentioned some of them throughout the book that you're not going to see in those spaces, but they're just as equally as talented.
absolutely. And we get relegated to special exhibits or Black
Mm-hmm.
History Month or Juneteenth. Then it's
Mm-hmm.
acceptable. Bring that Black art out the closet and put it up, because there's a special occasion that's designated for them. But when in fact, we're part of this fabric of this country, have been, for centuries, and we're here. We're here to stay. Get over
Right.
the
Right.
wanting to isolate and to relegate to spaces of marginalization. We are valid people. Our art forms are valid, and deal with that.
Absolutely. And the reason why I brought her up specifically because as there is, this is kind of where the tie-in comes because she's this curator who's working on this great exhibit about the Dust Bowl, and that's where the two stories kind of begin to connect. Without me giving it all away, that's where the stories do begin to connect because she is a curator, and there is in this book someone who had taken some pictures of African Americans during that time. Now, was there someone parallel, or that is artistic license?
No, she wasn't a real character. The photographer that we get to see in the book, she was not a real person. There was a Dorothea Lange, Caucasian woman, who did a lot of documentation, filmography, or documentation of the Dust Bowl or orphans, or Dust Bowl era. Pardon me. Her camera was largely trained again on white Americans. And
Mm-hmm.
to her justice, she did, incorporate African Americans, but usually from like the 60s, the civil
Okay.
rights era. Um, and uh, and there was another gentleman, I can't call his name right now, but he too, his lens was trained on later decades, not this 30s so much. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so again, we're kind of absent from the narrative, from the photographic narrative of this
Mm-hmm.
occasion. Yet we were there, we existed. I will testify. My family came from Oklahoma. My great grandfather brought my family from Oklahoma to California, so we were there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just talking about California, we talked about it just a teeny tiny bit, but a lot of people have this idea of going to California. It's this wonderful liberal space in which to be and to live, and everybody's free, and everybody loves everybody. Well, we know that that's not true.
Correct. Correct. And I'm
And
glad. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, and you talk about that in the book though, that the fact that they were dealing with Jim Crow and things like that in a different way.
Yes, ma'am. So I am third generation Californian.
Okay.
My mother's side, maternal. My grandmother was born in California. My mother was born in California. I am born in California. My mother will be celebrating her 80th birthday in March next month. My mother picked cotton in California.
Wow.
Let that sit with us for a moment. There
Wow.
were African Americans in California with sacks on their back picking cotton in the Central Valley, in the
Mm.
southern part of the states. So sometimes, again, our focus is so on the South that we forget Black people were divergent. We went different places, went different areas, and where we went, racism didn't have a zip code. It
Right.
might have been less overt in some ways, but we
Mm-hmm.
have to still deal with it, and we see that in the book where there is I'm not going to mention the name of it, but there's a relief agency that if I mentioned it, everybody on here would know what it is because it's still
Right.
current here in our lives today. It still exists now,
Right.
but back during the time of the Dust Bowl orphans in this book, that relief agency had signs of segregation.
Mm-hmm.
Whites here, coloreds here. And we
Mm-hmm.
know who got served first and who got
Right.
relief and aid first. It wasn't us. So no, California is not exempt of any. We have sundown towns in California. We
Yeah.
have
Now that surprised me though, because this is new.
there's a community not far from where I live, maybe about 15 miles south of where I live here in California, that is a big, brawling, growing, expanding suburb right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say even 30 years ago, you bet not drive through there after dark. You better not
Mm-hmm.
move there unless you want to deal with some backlash from your
Absolutely.
neighbors that don't appreciate your color. So
Hmm.
welcome to California where it never rains. Racism is here. Racism
And
is
in my head, I'm thinking California love. Not
yeah.
everywhere.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Not
ma'am.
everywhere. And just a quick sidebar, there's a podcast that I listened to, Demetria Lucas's Ratchet and Respectable, and she's not from California, but she's currently living in LA. And a lot of times I hear her say, LA is racist. like don't believe the hype. So yes,
Exactly. Exactly.
just
Listen,
right.
Rodney King, that was California.
Exactly.
That was California, y'all. Don't get it twisted.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And then
So,
can I say something about sundown towns, just in case someone doesn't know what a sundown town is?
yes.
Were
Yes.
towns that were you could come through the day, do your work, whatever you needed to do. If you were a domestic, or maybe you're hauling wood, truck, fruit, something. But by sundown, if your skin was like ours, you had to leave for your own safety and well-being. You were not
Mhm.
welcome there. And I've even seen signs to the nature, if you're here after dark, sorry if you don't see sunlight.
Wow. Yeah. So that's something. So, no matter where we are, unfortunately, this is something that we have to deal with. And of course, and you speak on it somewhat in the book, not just blacks, of course, we
Mhm.
know, but people of other ethnicities as well, that, it's not all love, you know, but
Absolutely.
yet still we rise.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes,
Still we
ma'am.
rise. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. The resilience. And you'll see that in these. There's no way I could have done what Faith and Hope did and
Right.
survive. We have the benefit of a cell phone. I need to call someone, come pick me up. We have Uber, we have Lyft, we have all types of means of conveniences to make our lives easier. And still, sometimes our lives are a little, they're challenged and they're shaky or whatever. We
Right.
all go through things. But what these two young ladies do and what they accomplish, don't ask me to, because there's no way that I could.
Right, absolutely. To be in this space and to be separated from their family, to make their way to California and to be able to, you know, um, to avoid getting in situations that could have been very detrimental to them to survive. and to ultimately thrive. You're absolutely right. That's something, but that just speaks to the spirit of, what's within us. And
Yes.
of course, it doesn't happen for everyone, but there are plenty of us that have been able to manage and to survive and, to go on to thrive, in spite of the things that were happening around us.
Yes.
So that's very powerful. And once again, I'm going to keep hyping you up because I really just love your work and the way that you tell
Oh,
stories. So
thank you.
yes. One of the other things that came to mind is just the whole thing of family and genealogy and understanding where you come from, and how for a lot of us it is a challenge. This is something that Zoe deals with, looking for records and trying to figure out who's who and what's what, once she has a reason to, delve into her family history. And, just seeing that a lot of times you're going to hit, dead ends because either the records weren't there, or, things weren't categorized properly, or, anything like that. So have you been able to trace your genealogy?
I had it. I won't mention the platform, but we all know there's a platform out there that you could do some research. And so I had an
Right.
account there, and I actually gave up because I was hitting those roadblocks and I was hitting those dead ends and not finding more pieces that I wanted, particularly on my paternal side, because I don't know that side of my family. So that's
Mm.
my hope, that I could go there and find some things. And I was able on my paternal side to find back to my great grandmother,
Okay.
who was my father's mother, and he raised my father, or she raised my father, pardon me. And that's where it kind of like the dead end. So recently, Miss Marcy, I would say like the end of the year that we just passed, 2021, I resumed searching, and I was able to go beyond, but not on my paternal side, on my mother's. And I was able to
Mm.
go back, get it right, to my great 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 grandfather, born like in the early 1800s.
Oh, wow. That is a blessing. That is a
Yes,
blessing.
that is so like exciting to me. And then I want to sit and imagine their lives. What was
Mhm.
your life like? What did you endure? What did you see? What did you hope for? What did you dream? What did you pray for? Am I an answer to any of your prayers? So
Mm.
I always I feel very how do I want to say, obligated to the ancestors.
Absolutely.
I really do. And especially when I'm storytelling and writing books, I want to honor them, and I want to honor their voyages. I want to honor who they are, who they were, and I will be quiet and be still even in my pre-writing time. Part of my ritual is to be quiet and welcome the ancestors. Would you
Mm.
like to say something through me? And I like to assume the role of a typist. I'm a storyteller,
Mm.
but I have learned to be the typist and let spirit, ancestors, whoever is telling this story, allow them to tell that through me. So, back to what you were saying about family connections and running into dead ends, I think that Zoe's quest, for connecting loose ends, I think that does kind of harken back to our enslaved period, where we
Mm.
lost ties and we're searching and we're looking for each other, and we can't find each other. Sometimes we did find each other,
Right.
because there's so many pieces of information missing. Like you said, don't know dates, don't know dates we were born, don't know the names of our lost connections. So I think that is another tie, between Zoe and history, even our history behind us, that we're still searching. As you said,
Absolutely.
we're still looking. And some people might say, well, this was just too convenient, the way Zoe finds her people. It was just too convenient. I actually kind of saw a review already that there were, coincidences.
Hmm.
It's a big world, but it's a
Right.
small world, and there are some phenomenal things that happen. I have a beloved family member who is family by adoption. My family
Hmm.
member is adopted, but this family member went to school with their own biological siblings and did
Mm.
not know it
Right.
until they were adult. So don't talk
Right.
to me too convenient and there's too much coincidence. Hey, beautiful things like that do happen.
They do. They do. Absolutely. Where, yeah, where you find things out and like, what? I didn't know. I didn't realize, because it is true that a lot of times, and I think it does kind of speak to the fact of families being separated, or, like someone, it might have been, this person's child, but this person raised them and,
Mhm.
excuse me, they never knew. And then later on, they find out they grew up around the corner from each other, whatever. I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. So, I would say, agree with you that just because one specific person may not have seen it or experienced it, for me as the reader, I didn't feel like it was so far fetched. Oh yeah, of course it's gonna happen. She's got to write the story. Like, no,
Yeah. Good. That.
because we do know that those sorts of things
Mhm.
happen. But just thinking back to what you said about and we were talking about the dead ends and things like that. It's like, for me, it's on my mom's side. I hit like a dead end on her side. She was born and raised here in Georgia, Southern Georgia,
Yeah.
and you figure what was probably happening in Southern Georgia. So there are a lot of records that were either lost, or my mother's mother had two birth dates because she wasn't sure exactly which one was
Oh,
right. you
wow.
know Her
Yeah.
sister, my great aunt, same thing, had two different birth dates because we don't really know for sure
Right.
which
Oh my
one it
goodness.
was.
Uh-huh.
So I can go like to my great grandmother, and then it kind of stops. I can't
Yeah.
go much further. So what I did was, last year I did the African Ancestry, so I could find out maternally what tribe or what people we come from, and
Right.
that is the Mende people of Sierra Leone. So even though I may not have specific names right now, specific people, me, that makes me feel good because at least I know, okay, I might not know all the ones in between, but I kind of know where we started, so to
Yeah.
speak, at least from that branch of
Yeah.
the tree. Now, on my father's side, and I wish I had them since we're talking about this, but on my father's side, I can go back farther. I actually have some photos from probably the 1800s and things like that of people. So, yes, I mean, I just, some people may not see the importance of it, but I do believe it's good to know where we come from, and just to kind of have an idea, because it does speak to our ability to you know deal with a lot of different things and move through a lot of different things, and like you said, be the answer to somebody's prayer. So,
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
and I do also, you talk about the ancestors, you do speak
Yeah.
of the ancestors and include the ancestors in the story, which I love, because they are here and they are here with us.
Absolutely. I think sometimes we can overlook that there are those who have gone before us. Not that we have to always live in the past, but we still need to be aware and cognizant that we haven't gained what we have gained by ourselves.
Right.
That we stand on someone else's shoulders. And a lot of times we contemporary people will look back and despise,
Mm.
those that who are behind. Well, I wouldn't have done that. I've, heard people say, I'd never be a slave. You couldn't, I would do
Did
such
you
and
have a
such.
choice?
As if our ancestors said, yes, please, I'd like to be enslaved today. Oh, you couldn't do that to me. Or, I remember when after Mr. Floyd's murder, George Floyd was murdered, and a lot of the press protests, and you'd see some of us young people or whatever holding up signs, don't blank, don't I'll just use the word mess. Don't mess with us. We're not our ancestors. And it's like, that's so demeaning. You're seeing that your
Mm.
ancestors didn't protest, they didn't rise up, they didn't fight back, that they, laid on the bed of ease. No, they did not. It's because of
Mm.
their strength that we're here and that we are able to fight and we're able to resist. You don't know how they did or did not resist. Go read a history book. They did all kinds of stuff to resist slavery, from breaking instruments to pretending to be, instruments, excuse me, tools, breaking the tools so you can't farm today, pretending to be sick, et cetera, et cetera. They did so much to fight back and to resist. So we stand on their shoulders, we stand on their backs, and let us be mindful this Black History Month that we're here because somebody else sacrificed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lest we forget. Lest we forget. One of the other things is just I really appreciate just all the little tidbits of history, and once again, I don't give a lot away, but I will say this much. I loved seeing Faith at a
Mhm.
certain point have some different opportunities in her life to be able to utilize her skills and in a way that was not necessarily traditional.
Mhm.
And I love seeing that because also shows one of the things about Brown Girl Collective is over the years I've shared stories of Black women,
Mhm.
always, who have done things throughout history and sometimes thinking outside of the box, or having to move outside of the country, or whatever the case may be, in order to be recognized for just for who they are or what they're doing, and not just be looked at as this little Black girl, gal, or whatever, but to actually be able to live and to thrive. So I really could appreciate you incorporating elements of that into the story as well, so that we could see, yes, there were a lot of things that weren't good. There are a lot of things that still aren't good, but there
Mhm.
are ways that we learn to survive and thrive and kind of take control of our own destiny, even in the 30s, 40s, and beyond.
Yes, ma'am. And I think one of the things about Faith that I love is her resilience.
Mm-hmm.
She's resilient and she realizes immediately I'm responsible, not just for myself, but for my baby sister. So
Mm-hmm.
if I don't survive, what happens to my baby sister? I have no choice but to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And, thankfully they're blessed with kind people along the way. They're also blessed, or not blessed, but they also encounter some crazy people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh my
Thank
God.
God they got away. I'll just say that much. You got to read it to find out, and thank God they got away.
Ooh, let me tell you, they meet some crazy people in the story. It's like, oh my God. But again, they meet some, good people, and then they meet again some like, oh my God, this person's kind of they ain't all there. But
Mm-hmm.
that impact their lives. But we also see, Faith's resilience and her this child is so determined. She's like, if
Absolutely.
it's the last thing I do, the last breath I take, I'm finding my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make sure my baby sister is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have, readers will have to read to find out if she does find her family or not. But
Right.
it's just unmistakable that this little girl is just a fireball of determination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Finding her family and holding on to what was important to her family while she was in Oklahoma. Just being able to hold on to what's important, you
Yes, ma'am.
know.
Yes, ma'am. And then back to what you were saying earlier. Um, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought just like that. But not the resilience, but before we were talking about the connections. Um, I apologize. My train of thought just totally went out the window.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, but she definitely resilient, and she used what was available to her, which was her mind. She used
Mm-hmm.
her mind and the gifts. That's what we were talking about. Gifts making room for her and
Absolutely.
allowing her, opportunities that she herself didn't even imagine or dream. And again, here's this little girl or young lady, 16, 15 years old from the deep South. Her highest dream is, well, maybe I'll be a secretary one day,
Right.
or maybe I'll get a college education because Mama says we should. But
Mm-hmm.
all she sees is, marriage and babies ahead of her. She doesn't really have, big dreams the way that we approach dreams. Yet,
Right.
and still, she gets to experience a different kind of life before that book is over.
Absolutely. And I mean, in every way, it's different. She did not follow a traditional path,
Yeah.
in any way.
We're not
I
going to talk
love
about
it.
one, but I know what you're talking about.
Right, right. Because there is some romance in the midst of all the searching for family and connection and all of that. But the things that she did, and actually, Zoe was a lot like her in certain ways. So yes, they both, they didn't always do things the way that the world told them that they should do it. And quite honestly, that's something we've been talking about a lot at Brown Girl Collective lately. It's just, we as women being able to make decisions that are right for us. Mm-hmm. And, even when it pertains to our romantic relationships or children or not children or whatever it is, that it's important for us to be empowered, in those areas. And, if we shall seek romantic partnership, that we are having that with people who are going to be fine with us being who we are.
Yes, ma'am. And I think a word I like to use sometimes is agency. That this young lady, she found agency. She found a way to make her world right for her. And she didn't have the best of circumstances, and some blessings came, and she was able to take advantage of those blessings and those opportunities. And even when she took them, it wasn't about just, I'm going to go be this great, so and so. I need to take care of my family. Right. I need to make sure my baby sister is taken care of. I need to make sure, so she had that as her motivation and her agenda. It wasn't just, I'm going to go off into the sunset and I'll see y'all later. Take care. Bye-bye. No, still always had that sense of connectivity and obligation to family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, it's just so powerful. Just the story. I already told you earlier that, as because I did some reading and I did some listening, but I was sitting crying. I'm just like, Lord have mercy, trying to get it together. Get it together. So for those of you who choose to read the book or listen to the audio, it is on Audible as well. Be ready.
Now that's what I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss Marcy.
No, I was gonna say, even one of the reviews that I said, it's like a whirlwind of emotion. I felt all the things. You're gonna feel all the things, which is good.
Yeah, it's a dust storm of emotion.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
What I was going to say is I'm actually looking forward to listening to the Audible. So I haven't listened to it yet, only just, a snippet of it. So I'm looking forward to hearing the Audible.
Oh yeah, it was good. It was good. Because like I said, I read so much, and it's like sometimes I have to go to the Audible just to make sure that I finish things in a timely manner. So yes, it was indeed a pleasure to listen to it, and there are two different voices.
Yes, ma'am.
There. So that was good. So one is Faith and one is Zoe. So that was good to be able, since they are taking place at different times, just to be able to hear the different voices and all of that. So that is wonderful. So I know that like right now you are out here promoting this new book. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure people are going to love you. As I mentioned early on, you've already won an award or gotten some recognition. The reviews are all, by and large, 4+. There's always going to be that one. But, people are really loving it. As I said, I have become a fan of your work, starting with, The Girl at the Back of the Bus. Really love that and love this. And as I told you, you've done it again. You have done it again. I'm like, I just don't know what's next. So is there anything coming next that we can be on the lookout for?
Yes, ma'am. There is another book that will also be a dual timeline. Okay. Another multi-generational story. And this one will actually come out in September.
Okay.
So yeah, your girl got to get to writing because I'm not finished.
Oh, you're not finished. Okay.
The deadline is swiftly approaching. So that's what I'll be doing, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And even at one point in time, I'll have to get up at 4 o'clock when I get closer.
Oh, wow.
To make sure that it's finished and turned in on time. So that one, I can't release the name yet, but let's just say we're going to find out. This one actually has a real historical character in it.
Okay.
Whole different ball of intimidating because I have to
Oh,
make sure,
wow.
even more accuracy. Of course, I don't know everything about this young lady's life, and I'm going to have to use fictitious or my creative imagination, of course.
Mm.
But let's just say this young lady happens to be the enslaved of one of our presidents, and
Mm.
it's not Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
Yes, so let's find
Mm.
out who this young lady is. Um, some of us may have heard of her. I only heard of her myself maybe a year or so ago, or a little bit more
Mhm.
ago. So we're going to find out about this young lady who was an enslaved member of a president's household.
Mm. So let
Yeah.
me ask, that brings up another question for me. So what is it, and this is for people who might be writers or, thinking about writing. What is it that, how do you kind of know what direction to move in terms of what you're going to write next? Or, what is it that, I mean, I know you work with a publisher, probably agent, all these things, but just for you and your own creative process, how do you kind of decide what it is you're going to write about?
A beautiful question. What feels right? Where my mind goes, where my mind won't let go of, where I latch onto. I can have like a pit bull spirit. And when I latch onto something, I know that I need to shake that and find out what's there for me. And stories that come forward, a story could come forward from that. I also know, again, to be quiet. So like for example, when I finish this book that I'm currently working on, that's due to my editor in April, my intention, Miss Marcy, is to get quiet because the last year has been very busy with writing, extremely busy. And I want to allow myself some time to be quiet and listen to my spirit so that I know where I am supposed to go next.
Right.
One of my thoughts is to do something a little bit more lighthearted, just to kind of decompress. Because when you're writing Black history, it's not pretty all the time, and it's not always easy, and it could be heavy in moments. And if not heavy, it's just it's real, and it's raw. I'll use that word for right now. It can be very raw, and it can be very emotional. And
Mhm.
you as the reader is crying, but trust me, as the writer, I'm crying also. So
Mhm.
it's like I think I need to do something maybe a little bit lighthearted, just a
Right.
short little, not a novella, but a smaller book, just to kind of, brighten myself a little bit. So we'll find out, Miss Darcy, to answer your question, we'll find out where we go next. But I also spend time in prayer, to be quiet and
Mhm.
just to hear what comes up inside of me.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, you can tell that there is love in the pages, just in the way that you write, the dialogue, the history. I mean, there's just so much that there's love in the pages, and I have to say that this is airing on Valentine's Day. There is love in the pages of what Suzette D Harrison writes. It's there, and not just between the characters, but just in the way that the stories are told and the attention to detail and all of that. There's love in it, and yes.
Thank you. That is beautiful and that's very meaningful. And I take that to heart and I treasure that. I appreciate you saying that because I do try to write from my spirit and from my heart. I used to write just from my head. I used to
Mhm.
write just from what's popular. What's popular right now? Well, then get on that bandwagon and write that. But I had to draw back from that and decide what kind of writer I wanted to be. So I want to be a writer who writes from heart, who writes from spirit, and not just cerebrally or just what's fashionable and what's on trend. And that's
Mhm.
not always popular, So I really appreciate you that you read the love that's there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm like, why am I getting emotional? It's your book. But it's like, yes, I mean, because I do read a lot, as you can see. Just one on the other side too. I read a lot. I interview a lot of writers, and this is, nothing to say against anyone else because that's not it. I love them all, but certain things you can just sense it. You know. You can just sense it when, just like a person who creates music or art or whatever, you can, there's just something, there's a spirit in their work that just can resonate in ways that maybe other works, it might be, technically just as good or whatever the case may be. That same spirit doesn't resonate. So I just had to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we know to be on the lookout for something again in September. And, since we have a connection.
I got you, sis.
I'll be looking to come back. And that's my birthday month as well. So that'll be good.
When's your birthday, if you don't mind telling me on air? If not, you can tell me later.
That's okay. It's 26th. It's September 26th.
Oh, happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday. Yes. But yes, so I'll be looking forward to reading the next work in my birthday month. And for everyone, let me go ahead and slide this title up here again, just for everybody to know what it is in case you missed it. We have been talking about, and where did my note go? We have been talking about The Dust Bowl Orphans by Suzette D Harrison. It is now available in stores. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Vanna. It is now available in stores. It is available on Audible. It is a good story about love of family, love of Black people, which is perfect in this month, Black History Month, and as I mentioned, this will be up on Valentine's Day. It's a perfect love story for you all. So, thank you, Suzette. I want you to hang there for a second, and I appreciate you. Hang there for a second. I'm going to do a couple of quick announcements, and then I'll talk to you on the other side. But just want to share some things with the other folks. So hold on for one moment. All right. So this has been a wonderful conversation again with someone who writes wonderful work. And I actually consider her now to be a friend. So thank you so much for joining this conversation with Suzette. And go ahead and grab that book if you haven't read The Girl at the Back of the Bus. Get that one too. Just read them all. Read them all, because she deserves your support. We want to see so much more coming from her. So just to let you know what's ahead, on the 21st of this month, which is a week from now, we'll be talking to Kia Corthron on Monday, February 21st, also at 8:00 p.m. about her book, Moon and the Mars. So be ready to join us then. And then, and 2 weeks after that, we will have another historical novel by Sadiqa Johnson, The Yellow Wife. And that will be the last day of Black History Month, February 28th. So I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Please like and share this video. Buy the books. Support these sisters who are writing for us stories by, for, and about us. Go ahead and support them. And I look forward to seeing you again really, really soon. Take care. Bye-bye.